The coffee in my hand had gone cold, but I hadn't noticed. I stood in Mark's kitchen that Sunday morning, watching my son's mouth move, hearing words that didn't make sense at first. Dad, you can't visit the kids anymore. You're too strict. You make them nervous. The mug slipped slightly in my grip. Behind Mark, Amber leaned against the counter, arms crossed, that thin smile playing at her lips. Not quite smirking. Almost. My grandson Tommy's laughter drifted from upstairs, oblivious to what was happening. Mark, what are you talking about? My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The kids get anxious when you're coming over. All the rules, the lectures about manners. It's too much. I'd taught history for 42 years. I'd raised Mark alone after his mother died when he was 12. I'd never heard the word nervous applied to our Sunday dinners, our garden talks, our quiet afternoons building model trains. So that's it? I'm banned from seeing my own grandchildren. The word banned tasted bitter. Mark's jaw tightened. Amber's smile widened just slightly. That's when I knew this wasn't Mark's idea at all. The drive home took 15 minutes, but I don't remember any of it. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my old Buick, knuckles white, while my mind stayed trapped in that kitchen. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different, emptier. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, staring at the weathered blue paint, the garden my wife Carolyn had planted 23 years ago before the cancer took her. Inside, the silence pressed against my ears like water. Photos lined the hallway. Mark at 5, gap-toothed and proud with his first library card. Mark at graduation. Mark's wedding, where I'd given the toast that made everyone cry. Tommy and Riley, my grandchildren, covered in flour after we'd baked Carolyn's famous snickerdoodles last Christmas. The grandfather clock in the living room ticked steadily, the only sound breaking the stillness. I walked to Carolyn's portrait above the mantel. She wore that yellow sundress, the one from our anniversary trip to Cape Cod. Her eyes seemed to follow me as I sank into my reading chair. They won't let me see the kids, I whispered to her painted face. The house offered no answers, just echoes of what used to be. Tuesday morning, I walked to Betty's diner like I'd done every week for 15 years. The bell above the door chimed, and Betty waved from behind the counter. But something felt off. Conversations paused when I entered. Eyes darted away. I slid into my usual booth. Walter, my chess partner, approached with his coffee. His face carried that careful expression people wear when they know something you don't. Franklin, I need to ask you something. He sat down heavily. Is it true what Amber's been saying? About you being rough with the grandkids? My stomach dropped. Rough? Walter, I've never laid a hand on those children. That's what I figured. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. But she's been talking at the grocery store, the book club. Says you're controlling. That you criticize everything they do. One woman even used the word abusive. The word hung in the air like smoke. I thought of Tommy showing me his report card, how I'd praise his B+ in math. Riley learned to ride her bike while I jogged beside her, cheering. That's not true. None of it. Walter patted my shoulder. I believe you, but you should know. People were listening to her. That evening, I called Mark. My hands shook as I dialed. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice tight. Dad, I'm busy. I heard what Amber's been saying around town. Mark, you know me. You know I would never hurt those kids. Silence stretched between us. In the background, I heard Amber's voice, sharp and questioning. Who is it? It's complicated, Dad. Mark's tone shifted, defensive. Maybe you don't realize how you come across. The kids mentioned feeling pressure about their grades, about sitting up straight at dinner. I'm teaching them respect. Structure. The same things I taught you. Yeah, and look how that turned out. The word struck like a slap. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. We need space right now. Please stop making this harder. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone, wondering when my son had started believing lies more easily than truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, searching for the moment I'd lost him. Saturday afternoon, I tackled the filing cabinet in my office. Bills, tax returns, warranties for appliances we no longer owned. In the back of the bottom drawer, my fingers brushed an envelope. Carolyn's handwriting. My breath caught. The paper had yellowed slightly, dated 3 months before she died. I'd forgotten about this letter. My dearest Franklin, it began. Her words filled 2 pages, written during one of her final clear days before the morphine made everything fuzzy. I know you'll want to retreat after I'm gone. You'll bury yourself in routines and silence. But please don't let our family drift apart. Mark will need you, even when he pretends he doesn't. Future grandchildren will need your steadiness. You're the roots that hold the tree, even when the branches bend away in wind. Fight for those connections. They're worth the effort. The love you give, even when it's strict, even when it's uncomfortable, that's what lasts. Don't ever stop caring, even when caring hurts. I read it 3 times. My eyes burned. Carolyn had known me too well, seen my tendency to withdraw when wounded, but she'd also believed in me. That mattered. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my shirt pocket, right over my heart. Something inside me shifted. I wouldn't disappear quietly. Monday morning, I opened my dresser's top drawer, reaching for the velvet box that held my father's pocket watch. I'd been saving it for Mark, planning to give it to him on his 40th birthday next month. The box sat exactly where I'd left it, but when I opened it, the watch was gone. Only the faded silk lining remained. My pulse quickened. I searched every drawer, every shelf, tore through the closet. Nothing. The watch had been in my family for 3 generations. Solid gold with my grandfather's initials engraved on the back. Worth several $1,000s, but its real value was memory. I called my attorney, Bernard Wells, an old friend from my teaching days. Bernard, I need to check something. Years ago, I listed Mark as executor of my will. Is that still current? Papers rustled on his end. Yes, that's correct. Why? Someone's been in my house. A family heirloom is missing. Silence. Then Bernard's careful voice. Franklin, have you given Mark access to your accounts or property recently? He helped me set up online banking last year. Why? Maybe we should schedule a meeting. Tomorrow work. Bernard's office smelled like old books and lemon polish. He spread papers across his mahogany desk, his reading glasses perched on his nose. I pulled your financial records, Franklin. Small withdrawals have been occurring over the past 8 months. Nothing huge, $50 to $200 at a time, but they add up to about $3,000. My jaw tightened. I didn't authorize any of that. The IP address traces to a computer in your son's neighborhood. The withdrawals stop and start in patterns that match when you mentioned being away, visiting your sister in Vermont. Bernard removed his glasses. I'm not saying it's criminal yet, but it's concerning. I thought about Mark's new truck, Amber's expensive purses, their recent vacation to Florida. They'd posted all over social media. What are my options? First, change all your passwords. Second, remove Mark as executor. Third, Bernard leaned forward. Consider who you actually want inheriting your estate, because right now they're expecting everything. I stared out his window at the courthouse across the street. 42 years of teaching, of saving, of building something to pass down. Let's make sure my legacy goes where it's truly valued, I said quietly. Bernard smiled. Now we're talking. That Thursday, I met Judith Klein at Bernard's recommendation. She specialized in estate planning, and Bernard had whispered, protecting assets from ungrateful relatives. Her office was smaller than Bernard's, but twice as organized. Files color-coded, desks spotless. Every pen in its designated holder. Mr. Hayes, Bernard briefed me on your situation. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. I've seen this pattern before. Family members position themselves as helpful, gain access, then slowly redirect resources. It's financial elder abuse, even if it's subtle. The term startled me. Abuse seems strong. Is it? They've isolated you from your grandchildren, damaged your reputation in your community, and helped themselves to your money. That's not love. That's manipulation. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what I propose. We create a trust. Your assets transfer into it, with specific conditions for any potential heirs. Not just you get this when I die, but you get this if you demonstrate these values. Think of it as a final exam in character. I remembered grading papers for 4 decades, how some students would do anything for an A except actual learning. What kind of conditions? Judith's smile was sharp. Whatever you think tests true family devotion versus greed. Bernard tells me you're creative. Let's use that. I spent that evening at my kitchen table, writing. The grandfather clock ticked in the other room. Marking time, I suddenly felt running short. In front of me lay birthday cards. Simple ones I bought at the drugstore. One for Tommy's 9th birthday next week. One for Riley's 7th in 2 weeks. I wrote carefully in each. Dear Tommy, I hope your 9th year is filled with adventure and learning. I'm proud of you. Love, Grandpa. No money inside, no gift cards. Just words. I addressed them and walked to the mailbox at the corner, dropping them in before I could second-guess myself. 2 weeks later, both cards appeared in my mailbox, stamped, "Return to sender," in Amber's looping handwriting. I stood at the end of my driveway, holding those rejected cards, feeling something inside me go cold and hard. That evening, I opened my laptop and created a new document. I titled it the Franklin Hayes Family Trust, Terms and Conditions. The cursor blinked on the blank page. Then I began typing, slowly at first, then faster as the plan took shape. By midnight, I had 10 pages outlining exactly how my heirs would prove themselves worthy. Judith was right. This wasn't just estate planning. It was my final lesson. Judith read my draft in silence, her red pen occasionally marking sections. Finally, she looked up. This is brilliant. And completely legal. You're sure? Absolutely. You're free to attach any conditions to your estate, as long as they're not illegal or impossible. Your requirements are reasonable. Demonstrate care for elderly neighbors. Volunteer 50 hours at a community organization. Write a 1,000-word essay on what family means. These are character tests. She tapped the page. The house transfers to the trust immediately. Your savings, investments, everything. You retain full use and control while alive. But after you pass, the trust becomes active. Your grandchildren get access to their inheritance at 21, but only if they complete these requirements. Mark and Amber get nothing unless they can prove 12 months of documented community service and family counseling. Can they contest it? They can try. But your mental capacity is clearly sound. You're working with licensed attorneys, and everything is documented. Plus, she smiled, you're writing them a detailed explanation of why. That letter becomes part of the legal record. I signed the papers that afternoon. My signature felt heavier than usual, weighted with finality. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. 3 months passed quietly. Then in November, I called Mark. He answered cautiously. Dad, I'd like to invite you all for Thanksgiving. I know things have been strained, but I miss you. Miss the kids. Silence. I heard muffled conversation, Amber's voice asking questions. Can we call you back? An hour later, my phone rang. We'd love to come, Dad. The kids have been asking about you. The lie was obvious, but I played along. Wonderful. 2 o'clock. Thanksgiving morning, I cooked Carolyn's recipes. Turkey with her butter, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, apple pie from scratch. The house filled with scents I hadn't smelled in months. When they arrived, Amber's eyes swept the room, cataloging, assessing. Mark carried a bottle of wine, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Tommy and Riley burst through the door, taller than I remembered. Grandpa! Riley hugged me tight. For a moment, the anger dissolved. These kids weren't the problem. I'd fight for them differently now. During dinner, I was warm, generous with compliments. I asked about school, praised their manners, laughed at Tommy's jokes. Amber visibly relaxed. Mark's shoulders loosened. They thought I'd surrendered. Before they left, I handed Mark the wine bottle I'd bought. For you, quality time with family matters most. His eyes misted slightly. Thanks, Dad. Perfect. The easier I seemed, the harder they'd fall later. They left around 7. I started clearing dishes, carrying plates from the dining room to the kitchen. That's when I heard Amber's voice drifting from the kitchen, where she was rinsing glasses. He's finally learned his place. Took long enough. Mark's quieter response. Mom always said he'd mellow with age. Mellow. Amber laughed, sharp and cold. He's a relic who thinks kindness means control. But at least now he's useful. Did you see how much food he sent home with us? And I'm sure he'll be updating that soon. Old and guilty, that's the sweet spot. My hand tightened around the serving platter. Very slowly, I pulled out my phone, pressed record, and moved closer to the doorway. Your dad looked frail tonight, Amber continued. How much longer do you think? Amber don't. But Mark's protest was weak. I'm being practical. That house alone is worth $400,000, plus his pension, savings, everything. We've invested time here. I just want to make sure we're positioned correctly when the time comes. I stopped recording. 73 seconds of crystal clear audio. I saved it to 3 different cloud accounts, then emailed it to Judith with the subject line, evidence. Her reply came within minutes. Perfect. This strengthens everything. 2 days later, I dropped an envelope on Mark's porch when I knew they'd be at work. Inside, a brief note on my personal stationery, to be opened only in the event of my passing. Instructions regarding estate and final wishes. Keep in a safe place. Love, Dad. That evening, Mark called. Dad, I got your letter. Just being organized. At my age, you never know. Is everything okay? Are you sick? The concern in his voice almost sounded genuine. I'm fine. Just updating some paperwork. We'll talk soon. I hung up before he could press further. The next day, I saw Amber's car parked outside Betty's diner at 2 in the afternoon. Through the window, I watched her huddle with 2 other women, gesturing animatedly. My name drifted out when someone opened the door. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was speculating, spreading her version of concern and anticipation. That evening, my neighbor Patricia stopped by with cookies. Franklin, there's talk you're not well. I'm fine, Patricia. Amber mentioned you've been forgetful, having trouble with daily tasks. I smiled, keeping my voice level. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly healthy. Regular checkups, clean bill of health. Patricia looked relieved. I'm glad. You know how rumors spread. Yes, I did, and I was counting on it. January brought ice storms and an actual health scare. I was walking home from the library when the world tilted sideways. I woke up in the hospital, Mark standing over my bed, looking genuinely frightened. Dad, you collapsed. They're running tests. My head throbbed. What happened? Dehydration, low blood sugar. The doctor says you haven't been eating enough. He pulled a chair close. You need to take better care of yourself. For a moment, I saw my son again, not Amber's puppet. That made what I had to do harder. I suppose I should. Getting old isn't for cowards. Amber arrived an hour later. Concern painted across her face like stage makeup. Franklin, you scared us. I'm fine. Just foolishness. I let my voice sound weaker than I felt. Although this reminds me, I need to finish updating some paperwork. Final arrangements, that sort of thing. Amber's eyes sharpened despite her sympathetic expression. You don't need to worry about that now. Actually, I do. Judith Klein has been helping me ensure everything's clear. Wouldn't want confusion later. I watched her process this, saw the calculation behind her eyes. That's very responsible, she said carefully. We're here to help however you need. I smiled weakly and closed my eyes, pretending exhaustion. But I was wide awake inside, watching them take the bait. 2 days after my hospital release, Mark called. Dad, we were thinking maybe I should come with you to your next lawyer meeting, just to understand what's being planned, make things easier on everyone. That's kind, but Judith prefers individual consultations. Privacy rules, you understand. Right, of course. Disappointment colored his voice. It's just, we want to be helpful, supportive. The next morning, Amber showed up at Judith's office unannounced. Judith called me immediately. Your daughter-in-law just tried to schedule an appointment to discuss your care planning. I told her client confidentiality prevents any conversation without your explicit written consent. I smiled into the phone. What did she say? She wasn't happy. Started asking about your mental capacity, whether you were under any undue influence. I shut that down fast, told her you're remarkably sharp, and any insinuation otherwise could be considered slander. Good. Franklin, they're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. I'm counting on it. That evening, Mark and Amber arrived at my door with dinner from the Italian place downtown. We thought you shouldn't be cooking so soon after the hospital, Amber said, her smile bright and false. I invited them in, watching them watch my house. Cataloging, calculating, planning. It was almost sad. Over the next month, Mark and Amber transformed into devoted caregivers. Mark stopped by twice a week with groceries. Amber brought casseroles, invited me to Riley's school play, asked about my doctor appointments. To an outsider, they looked like perfect family. I played along, gracious but distant. I thanked them for their help, accepted their food, attended the school play where I cheered loudly for Riley. But I also took notes. Each visit, each gesture, each calculated act of kindness went into a leather journal I kept locked in my desk. February 3rd. Mark brought groceries, stayed 20 minutes, mostly talked about his work stress. Didn't ask about my health or interests. February 8th. Amber visited, brought chicken soup, spent 40 minutes looking through photo albums in the living room, asked 3 times about family heirlooms and what I wanted done with Carolyn's jewelry. February 15th. Both came for dinner. Mark asked about my investment accounts, suggested he could help manage them better. The journal filled with their performances. Each page evidence of something that looked like love but felt like surveillance. At night, I'd read through the entries, feeling sad and vindicated in equal measure. They were exactly who I'd suspected, but at least now I had proof. March brought warmer weather and a new project. I began writing what I called letters to my grandchildren. Not a traditional memoir, but something more focused. Stories about their grandmother, about values I hoped they'd embrace, about the difference between discipline and cruelty, between high standards and conditional love. I wrote about the day Mark was born, how Carolyn and I had argued about names for 3 hours before agreeing. I wrote about teaching him to ride a bike, to tie a tie, to stand up for himself without tearing others down. I wrote about the moment I met Tommy for the first time, how his tiny fingers had gripped mine with surprising strength, about Riley's laugh, which sounded exactly like Carolyn's. Each letter ended with a simple message. Being strict isn't the opposite of love. Sometimes it's the deepest form of it, holding someone to standards because you believe they're capable of meeting them. I had each letter notarized, creating a legal record. Then I sealed them in a fireproof box with instructions. They only be open when Tommy and Riley turned 18. The notary, an older woman named Dorothy, read a few pages and wiped her eyes. This is beautiful, Franklin. Your grandchildren will treasure these. I hope they'll understand them, I said quietly. That's all I can ask for. Late March, Amber found my journal. I'd left it deliberately visible in my office. A draft copy with just enough truth to be damaging. Her car was parked outside when I returned from my walk. I found her in my office, face flushed, journal in her hands. What is this? She held it up, trembling with rage. I took it from her gently. My private thoughts, which you're reading why. All of this about Mark and me being manipulative, calculating. You've been documenting us like we're criminals, aren't you? The question hung between us. Her mouth open, closed. I'm calling Mark. You're clearly not well. Creating conspiracy theories, accusing us of terrible things when we've been nothing but helpful. Helpful? Amber, I have recordings, bank statements, witness testimony. I know exactly what you are. Her face paled. You're making things up. A bitter old man who can't stand seeing his son happy. She stormed out, tires squealing as she left. I replaced the journal in the drawer. That was the edited version, inflammatory enough to panic her, but missing the truly damaging evidence. The real documentation sat in Judith's office safe. That evening, Mark called. Dad, we need to talk. Amber says you're keeping some kind of file on us, making accusations. I'm protecting myself, Mark. Something you taught me I needed to do. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Mark's voice, quiet and strained. What happened to us? You chose her over truth. I said simply, I'm just choosing myself for once. I hung up before he could respond. The final pieces were falling into place. April 18th. I invited them for dinner one last time. Spring had turned my garden riotous with color. Carolyn's tulips and daffodils blazing in the late afternoon sun. I cooked simply, grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, lemon bars for dessert. Mark arrived tense. Amber's smile brittle as glass. We ate in near silence, every word careful, waited. Finally, over coffee, I set down my cup. I wanted you both to know. I finalized my will. Everything's in order now, all decisions made. Amber leaned forward slightly. That's good, Dad. Peace of mind matters. Yes, it does. I met her eyes directly. I just hope you show me who you really are these past months, because that's all I needed. That's all any of this was about. Mark frowned. What do you mean? I mean, we see what we want to see until we're forced to see truth. I've seen enough. I stood, collecting plates. Thank you for coming. Drive safely. They left shortly after, confusion and concern chasing across their faces. Through the window, I watched them sit in their car for 10 minutes, gesturing, arguing. Amber's face was red. Mark's hands gripped the steering wheel. Finally, they drove away. I washed dishes slowly, methodically. The hard part was done. Now I just had to wait for time to finish what I'd started. The next year passed quietly. My health declined gradually. Nothing dramatic, just a slow fade of a 70-year-old body reaching its limits. I spent mornings at the community library, volunteering with their literacy program. Kids called me Mr. Hayes, just like my students once had. I taught them to read carefully, think critically, question assumptions. The same strict approach that had apparently made my grandchildren nervous. Afternoons, I worked in Carolyn's garden, keeping it beautiful. Neighbors would stop and chat. Patricia brought her grandchildren to see the roses. Walter still came for chess on Thursdays. My life felt full in ways that had nothing to do with Mark or Amber. I saw them occasionally, brief visits where they'd check on me, their concern performative and transparent. I was kind but distant, polite but unreachable. In September, I updated my will one final time, adding a personal letter to accompany the legal documents. Judith read it and nodded approvingly. This is your masterpiece, Franklin. Every word counts. It's just truth, I said. Sometimes that's enough. By December, I knew my time was coming soon. My doctor confirmed it. Heart failure. Months, not years remaining. I didn't tell Mark. I simply lived each day fully, finishing what needed finishing, saying what needed saying. My affairs were perfectly, deliberately in order. I passed quietly in my sleep on a Tuesday morning in February, exactly 2 years after that hospital scare. Patricia found me when I didn't answer the door for our morning walk. The funeral was larger than I expected. Former students, library volunteers, neighbors, fellow teachers from decades past. Mark delivered a eulogy about lessons learned and time wasted, his voice breaking authentically. Amber sat in the front row, appropriately somber. Afterward, at the reception, Judith approached them quietly. Mark, Amber, if you could stay a moment? Mr. Hayes left specific instructions for you both. They exchanged glances, that mix of grief and anticipation people wear at funerals when inheritance is involved. Other guests filtered out until only Mark, Amber, Judith, and Bernard remained. Judith pulled 2 envelopes from her briefcase. Your father requested these be read to you immediately following his service. She handed the first envelope to Mark. This is for both of you. Mark's hand shook slightly as he opened it. Inside, a single sheet in my handwriting. To my son and daughter-in-law, I leave you nothing but a reminder. Integrity cannot be inherited. Amber's face went white. What? Judith continued calmly. Mr. Hayes's entire estate, including the house, savings, and investments, has been placed in a trust for his grandchildren, accessible at age 21. Mark looked up from the letter, face contorted with confusion and hurt. That's it? Nothing. Judith handed him a thicker envelope. There's more. Inside were printed bank statements, highlighted withdrawals, screenshots of transaction dates, matching times I'd been away, then a printed transcript. He's finally learned his place. Took long enough. He's a relic who thinks kindness means control. How much longer do you think? Amber's voice, clear and damning. Mark read it twice, his face crumbling. When was this? Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Judith said quietly, "Your father recorded the entire conversation. It's been notarized and is part of the legal record." Amber stood abruptly. "He tricked us, set us up." "No," Bernard interjected. "He gave you every opportunity to be honest. You chose manipulation. That's on you." Judith pulled out another document. There's also the matter of unauthorized withdrawals from his accounts. Mr. Hayes declined to press charges, but the evidence is documented. Should either of you contest this will, that information becomes public record. Mark's hands dropped to his sides, paper scattering. Dad really believed this? That we were just, what? Waiting for him to die. Your actions suggested exactly that, Judith said. The trust stipulates that your children receive their inheritance only if they complete character requirements. Community service, family counseling, essays on integrity. Your father's final gift to them isn't money. It's lessons. Amber grabbed her purse. This is insane. We'll fight this. You can try, Bernard said mildly, but everything's airtight. Multiple attorneys, notarized documents, clear mental capacity. You'll lose and damage your reputation further in the process. They left without another word. Through the window, I imagined them sitting in their car, just like that April dinner, faces red with anger and shame. The truth had finally landed. Within a week, my letter to Mark and Amber spread through town. Someone, I suspected Judith, leaked it to the local paper's human interest columnist. It went viral online within days. Grandfather's final lesson. Integrity cannot be inherited. The article detailed the will's conditions, the recorded conversation, the quiet manipulation I'd endured. Comments flooded in, thousands of them. People sharing their own stories of family betrayal and elder abuse. Mark lost his position on the church board. Amber's book club quietly asked her not to return. Neighbors who'd once smiled and waved now crossed the street to avoid them. Patricia told Judith later that she'd seen Mark at the grocery store, looking thin and haunted. He tried to apologize to me, Patricia said, for what his wife said about Franklin. I told him some apologies come too late. The house sat empty for months while the trust administrators prepared it for its next purpose. My will specified it become part of a scholarship fund in Carolyn's name, housing students from difficult backgrounds while they attended the local college. Carolyn would have loved that. The pocket watch, tracked down in a pawn shop 3 towns over to the serial number I'd reported to police, was recovered and placed in a display case at the library with my teaching awards and plaque. Donated by Franklin Hayes, who believed in measuring time by what we give, not what we take. My memoir released 6 months after my death. Judith had found a small publisher interested in Letters to My Grandchildren, reflections on discipline, love, and legacy. It wasn't a bestseller, but it didn't need to be. Local papers reviewed it kindly. A heartfelt defense of high standards wrapped in deep affection, one wrote. Hayes reminds us that holding people accountable is its own form of love. The book circulated through schools, libraries, parenting groups. Teachers assigned excerpts. I'd written about the balance between structure and warmth, about how Carolyn had softened my edges without dulling my principles, about raising Mark alone after her death, trying to be both parents, probably failing more than succeeding, about the joy of grandchildren and the heartbreak of losing access to them, about choosing truth over comfort every single time. One chapter focused entirely on the will. Some will call this revenge. I'd written, but revenge implies wanting to hurt them. I don't. I want to teach them one last time that actions have consequences. That family means presence, not performance. That love without integrity is just manipulation with better publicity. The final chapter addressed Tommy and Riley directly. By the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand complexity. Your father made mistakes. So, did I. But I hope you'll see that loving someone doesn't mean accepting everything they do. Sometimes it means holding a line, even when that line divides you. Reviews mention readers crying. I hope Tommy and Riley would too, someday, but for the right reasons. 5 years after my death, Tommy turned 18. The trust administrators contacted him, explained the requirements for accessing his inheritance. He'd need to volunteer 50 hours, write his essay, complete family counseling sessions. Tommy called Judith. I want to read Grandpa's letters now. She met him in the house, now called the Hayes Scholarship House, where 3 college students live rent-free while maintaining Carolyn's garden. In my old office, she handed him the fireproof box. Tommy read for 3 hours, tears streaming down his face. When he finished, he called, Riley, you need to read these. All of them. 6 months later, they both appeared at Judith's office, requirements completed. Their essays were remarkably similar in theme. Grandpa wasn't strict. He just cared enough to expect our best. They visited the library, stood before the display case holding the pocket watch. Riley traced the glass with her finger. Mom said he was mean. Dad said he was impossible. What do you think? Judith asked, standing behind them. Tommy pulled out his phone, showing a photo of my memoir's dedication page. To Tommy and Riley, may you always know the difference between discipline and cruelty, between love and control, between family that lifts you up and family that weighs you down. I think, Tommy said quietly, he loved us enough to teach us, even after he was gone. They requested the pocket watch be moved to the scholarship house, hung in the main room where students gathered. Judith approved. The watch ticked steadily beneath my portrait, measuring time in moments of integrity, lessons learned in love that transcended death. Somewhere, I imagined Carolyn smiling. The roots had held, the tree still stood, and the branches, in time, had found their way home.